Hi, I'm Tony Spacey. Welcome to another episode of Get Hooked with the GAC Derby. Here we are again, Danebridge, one of the most picturesque Stillwater fisheries up in North Staffordshire, quite close to the Peak District National Park. Now, fishing any of these smaller Stillwaters, it's absolutely imperative to fan cast, and that's to put casts out around an imaginary clock face. You cover the water in front of you. Again, after 5 or 6 casts, if you haven't had any takes or any follows, it's probably a good idea to either move or try a slightly different setup. Now, when we first started, we had quite a few bumps and follows on a large cat's whisker on the intermediate line. So once we've got this cast in, we'll reel in and we're going to try a floating line. We're going to put a very small cat's whisker on a dropper with a small orange lure on the point. What we've done now, we've been using quite a big cat's whisker lure, and we've had a reasonable number of plucks and pulls, but nothing particularly aggressive or that we've been able to hook up on. So we're still keeping the same cat's whisker type, but now we've gone down considerably in size to one that's probably only half as big. Sometimes this is all the edge. If they're a bit nervous of the bigger one, plucking at it, sometimes by going down to the smaller size fly, that's all that it needs at times. And we're in. Once we can get his head up. Smaller fish this time. But absolute stonking fight. Here we are. Come on, lad. Now, one of the reasons I believe these slow intermediate lines are so effective is because it's the way the fly or the lure actually tracks through the water. By using a slow intermediate, I think the fly is probably adopting a more horizontal approach through the water, whereas if you're fishing with a floating line, it has to impart a kind of an up and down wave kind of motion. And I think the horizontal, especially with the lure, sometimes just is a little bit more realistic. And we're on the cat's whisker. Oh, no plucking, no hesitation, just a really good bang and a solid take. And a fish that's not very happy. Oh, this is really quite powerful head banging, and I don't think any fly fisherman or any fisherman probably likes it when they start head banging. Dare I say it, this is quite a nice fish again. I think it took fright at having seen Darren, my cameraman, there. It's a beautifully marked fish. I think I'm going to just play him down here a little while, because I think I need the bigger net. We don't want to lose this one at the net, because this could be the best fish of the day by the looks of him. So I've said before, you can lose a fish by having a net too small, but you never lose a fish by having a net that's too big. He's starting to tire now. And safely into the net. Yep, he's definitely the best fish we've had today. What a beautiful fish. Best today. An excellent fight. What we've done now is come down to the bottom end of the lake, the windward end. Very often with the smaller still waters, that when the wind's been blowing in a direction for a day or so, it's very common to find that the fish have migrated down the lake along with the wind. There's a couple of theories why this should be. The obvious one, of course, is that any natural food, and we've just lost one, gets blown down to the bottom of the lake, but also the warm water. That fish is determined. We've missed him twice now. The warm water also gets blown down on the bottom of the lake due to something called thermoclines. A lot of anglers that I've spoke to over the years seem to think that the water temperature starts off warm towards the surface and then gradually will go colder. In actual fact, there are things called thermoclines. And the thermocline is a dividing line between warm and cold water. Anybody who's been scuba diving will understand and will have experienced thermoclines. But because there's a sudden change of temperature, there's also a sudden change in the density of the water, and it actually allows the two layers of water to slide back and forth on top of each other. So what you find is that the warm water will actually be blown down to the bottom end of the lake. So you find sometimes the warmer water is all at the bottom end of the lake, so the bottom end is entirely warm water. The top upwind end is cold. Now, at different times of the year, of course, it may be advantageous to search out the cold water as opposed to hot water, but understanding and reading up a little bit on the way thermoclines work can sometimes really enhance your fish catching possibilities. During hot weather, it's quite often that the colder water is the place where the fish and the higher oxygen levels are. When the weather is cold, and in the winter, quite the opposite is true. The fish very often are where the warm water is. So there are good reasons for following the wind and either fishing at the downward or the upward end of a lake, or even the reservoirs, quite deliberately. Now, another tip I was always told when I first started fly fishing, and you see it very, very often, unfortunately, you make a cast which isn't the ideal, you see people stripping the line in, completely ignoring the fact that the fly's on the water, stripping the line in to cast again. Cast I've just made probably dropped 2 meters shorter than I really meant to. The fact is, the line's out there, the fly's out there, fish it in. All you can achieve by ripping the line in and recasting is extra disturbance of the water. Again, we're still a metre or so short of where my target area is, so I pull a little bit longer line off the reel in the knowledge that the next cast it'll be exactly where I wanted it. But in the meantime, I've got a reasonable cast out there that we're going to fish in. Absolutely bang on, just a foot away from the reeds. I've seen 1 or 2 brown trout, reasonable size, moving around. At this time of year, classic tactic for the bigger browns on the Stillwater. Big lure, let it sink, slow, steady retrieve. This is what happens when you let the amateurs borrow your gear. First cast.
What can I say?
But more importantly, well done, mate.
Cheers, mate. I'll let you have your rod back now.
These are the hardest fighting trout that we currently get in Britain, other than a truly wild sea trout. Absolutely gorgeous. You can see why it's called a blue trout. There's no red stripe, but that gorgeous blue. Well done, mate. I'll take my rod back now.
Cheers, mate.
Clear off. Well, that's it for now. Don't forget, join us next time for more tips, hints and more good fun fishing. Like the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, that way you'll never miss an episode. Until next time, tight lines.